Since Anthony brought it up, we might as well talk about the foundation grants. And both of us would tell you something. One of us coming to a meeting is bad enough. Both of us, we can be here on Monday and continue talking. So it's okay to get up and just walk out because we don't know when to stop most of the time.
Food runs out, so.
If you turn off the heat and the whiskey runs out, we'll leave. The foundation grants are compliments of really one person. How many of you remember David Woolweaver? Yeah. David was from 2011 to 2019 the director of the West Gulf. And he told me it would be fun, it wouldn't be any work. And he lied. So I became director. But when David stepped down as director, we elected him president of the Arrl Foundation. At that time, the foundation had about 125,000 in money to give away in scholarships. And every year it could give away maybe 25,000 in grants, maximum 3,000 grants. What he did is go talk to ARDC, Amateur Radio Digital Club. We now have 750,000 ARDC money, plus our 150. So we're running at 900,000 in scholarships, thanks to David. But the grant program is the other big deal. ARDC, as you know, made about $109 million selling a portion of their IP addresses to Amazon. They have finally gotten reasonably organized. They've got some really bright people running it. And they wanted to start getting that money into the community. And they were talking about establishing a grant program. Well, David said, why don't you, if you're going to do that, let the foundation help you funnel these grants into clubs. The backstory on the on and off nature of that would be a small book. The bottom line is David pulled it off. We have 500,000 to give out to clubs. And the 500,000 is not going to last long. For the past 6 months, 8 months, well, actually almost a year, whenever I've shown up, I've been telling people to get ready to start putting things together because it's going to come. It went officially live last night. Applications, you can find them online. They'll start coming in. He was in the webinar. I was in 2 other Arrl meetings last night, but he listened to the webinar. And Tammy, Steve had their plans already.
They did a poll on those sitting in on the webinar last night. And the biggest question was, do you have a package ready to submit? Do you have an idea? Do you have a iceberg in hell thinking about it? Something like that. 25% of those polled on the webinar last night said, we have a package in the chute ready to go out. So what we're saying is, if you don't have an idea and don't get your idea ready to go for a formal submission of your grant proposal, you won't make this cutoff. There's 2 tiers for this year in grants. So there's tier 1 and then tier 2. Tier 2 is, the deadline is late August, I believe.
Yes, sir.
So let me provide an idea here. One of the things I've heard from members of the club before is that QQ always wanted to do a video downlink from the ISS that was then published out to the web where schools throughout the country could then get it. And that there's not currently a station in the United States doing that. Would there be any interest in the club of us submitting a proposal for doing that setup here?
I'd say yes. I mean, it's all we've been talking about it for a while.
I believe that's on the AMP side.
So that would be one of the kind of ideas that would fit this grant. The money is there to do that kind of thing. It's nationwide, so it has some special kind of interest from the ARRL, and it's something that serves schools. It gets young kids interested in amateur radio. So it fits the design of what they're looking for very well.
Yes.
It takes a whole lot of commitment from us on putting something like that together. But that would be one of the idea kind of things they're looking for. The other one I've talked to some members about is the idea of putting together a races kind of a trailer that could go around to magnet schools and show them what amateur radio is all about, and try and get the high school level interest with a portable station you could take to those schools. You also could have a sister kind of station in Ecuador where you go into a magnet school here and they're able to talk to that school in Ecuador using the trailer that's here and equipment that's set up in that sister environment. So those are three of the kind of ideas that would come about. Then there's a matter of just the question of, is there a commitment of the club on any of those? Is there something we really want to do? And I know, Keith Pugh, when he donated the flex and a bunch of stuff that we're using the club today, his idea is someday we would be able to be that video distribution for signals coming from the satellite.
Let me add to what it's just said. There are, if you do not submit, or your application is not accepted on the Arrl Foundation grants, that's not the end of the world. That's a grant program. ARDC made $109 million. Do the math. 5% minimum return per year. See how much money they have to spend. Because they are 501c3, they don't spend a certain percentage of what they earn off the principal. IRS will take it. So they are dedicated to not giving any money to the IRS. They gave $1.1 million to Harvard to replace an old dome as part of the Amateur Radio Club. So they're not exactly shy about big projects or money. So the project, we were talking about this in the radio room. He's correct. This is not done in the United States. It would be a focus, a magnet for the entire country. And I think it requires so much planning, you may not get it into the Arrl grant program. Minimum grant for the Arrl is $2,500 up to $25,000. And like you said, there are two tiers. You don't make the first cut, try for the second cut. But I would suggest you try and find something you can spend money on. It doesn't hurt to ask. This project is bigger. ARDC is looking for worthy projects on which they can spend money. There was a $37,000 grant made to a club in Colorado to repair some repeater stations. I keep going on. They have given out significant sums of money. Their focus is education. If you put an education twist on it, they light up. So what you're proposing fits within their wheelhouse perfectly. If you were to propose, basically, back up on Brother Pugh, he also left a significant part of his estate to the Arrl Foundation. He actually gave two grants, one to the foundation and a second one that went into the Arrl itself. So since he is a recognized major donor, a project that you're doing tied back to the work he started would receive very favorable reaction. And if you decide to do it, you let me know, because it's a project that the league itself can get behind. One of the things that every time we have a meeting, besides who's going to buy the drinks after the meeting, is how do we get more youth into this hobby, service, whatever you want to call it. And I will tell you that if we sit here until Monday, it's going to be as difficult for all of us to come up with a way to do that as it does at headquarters. There's no magic way to do it, but we have to make it attractive. We have to, particularly with this younger generation. My phone had a dial on it when I was going out. And if I used it without permission, I've got my fingers broken. So, but the generation now is used to something that we have, they never would know what, I mean, I think there's the YouTube video where they're trying to get some kid to dial a dial phone, doesn't have to do it. But what you're talking about fits in what their interests are. And it's a project outside the normal grant. So if the club wants to do it, then let us know and we will try and make a league project to back you up. Anthony, your question?
Well, comment. My understanding from last night's presentation.
Anthony, you can't comment. We're not going to let you talk.
Okay. if you get schools involved that don't have an amateur radio license or whatever they want to start up, they can still apply, but they have to, my understanding is they have to apply for a call sign before they can be eligible for that grant, correct?
They need more than a call sign. They need the structure of the club. They have to have board of directors. They have to have governing bylaws. They need to be a club. The suggestion last night to that question was that if there's a teacher that wants money to build a school, club station, or get radios involved in STEM classes, then the teacher needs to reach out to a local club and let the club be the one that is getting the grant to assist that teacher with that project at the school. Again, the devil's in the details, like Bill was talking about, the manpower. You've got to define the manpower on how you're going to support this type of action and initiative. And then after you run out of money, how are you going to continue use of that project? Or is all that equipment going to be put in trash cans somewhere? Those are the devil in the details type things.
And let me split out, what he said is correct. Because I was talking to Will Weaver when we set this up. There's got to be a club in existence. It's got to have a real structure. It's got to have a bank account. The money's got to go somewhere. So you fit that profile for applying for grant. What you're talking about is an entirely different project. If we can put that project together, I'm serious, we're trying to get the league behind it. We can find a way to keep that continuing, because that would become a national focus. We'd bring in a lot of businesses. Back that up. They have donation money. They'll give it away. We might as well take it. We've been running a Teachers Institute for probably 10 years. Every year we send out notices to schools, and whether a teacher has a license or not, we will bring them, at least before COVID, we'd bring them into headquarters, and we'd teach them about amateur radio so that they could go back to schools and they can teach either amateur radio or subjects related to it. And that's a funded program. That will continue. It's separate from all the rest of this. There is something, there's an old song by Bob Dylan. Can't get my tongue back. The line is, times they are changing. And they're changing for a number of reasons. Prior to 2019, the league did not, or had abandoned giving support to clubs like this one. It had abandoned emergency communications. It had abandoned field service. And it wasn't really Dave's fault, but we can blame it on him. But in 2019, a group of us decided that needed to stop. In 2019, we fired a bunch of people because we got control of the board. We got rid of the gentleman who was supposed to be in charge of emergency management. His task, he told us, was to go to Hamfest. He didn't know squat about emergency communications. We created a position called Director of Emergency Management. That's not a staff position. That position reports directly to the CEO with authority regarding income. To back that up, we created a special committee. The league is 15 directors, 15 vice directors, elected every 3 years. You elect 5 every 3 years. But as a national corporation, it functions by committee. We have committees assigned to DXing, contesting, VDCs, but that committee also was supposed to be responsible for taking care of your needs, taking care of races, ARES, NTS. In a given 2-hour meeting of that committee, anyone want to guess how much time they spent on clubs, ARES, races?
5 minutes.
Probably 0.
You are 2 minutes too long. 3. And that's by timing. It's not that they were malicious, they're just too much to cover. That's the reason we broke it out into a new committee. If you look at minute 11 of the July 2021 minutes, they're published. The list of what the committee has authority to do is 2 pages long. That committee is charged with bringing back support to the clubs. How many of you as club officers used to knew that there was a handbook for club officers? Well, that's okay, because they stopped producing it in 2000. We've got, in fact, one of the people writing that may be out of Dallas. We've got some people that are working with us. But that handbook, if you've ever been a club officer, for those of you who haven't been one, you've got a surprise waiting for you to become one. Because there's no training. You've got an excellent club. You've got people who've got experience who help the new officers. A lot of clubs don't. This committee, there are 3 standing committees. What I talked about, the DX and contesting, what they call departments of services. The other committee, administration and finance, A&F, is supposed to take care of the building, make certain that not that much money is stolen in a given week. We can talk about them later. This committee is the 3rd standing committee. Nothing gets done at the league if it doesn't go through a committee. So emergency communications, field service committee is the new one. I'm one of the founders of it. I'm on it. The section managers like Steve are advisors to it. One of the first things that's coming out to benefit clubs is to fix a problem. How many of you know that the club gets a commission if anyone in this room renews their membership to the league? Okay. Tell me how much you get as a club for going through the paperwork to do that.
A couple
Kind of
dollars.
close. Couple is correct, $2.
$3.
The paperwork would drive you crazy. So I made a proposal a year ago. It's been approved. We're in the final stages of getting just the administrative stuff done. When it's finally done, if anyone in this club renews their Arrl membership through the club, it's $5. You were talking about bringing in new hands and bringing them back and keeping them interested. If they join the league through this club, it's $15. That hasn't changed. It will stay. But we want to bring money back into the clubs and focus or convince people they need to be part of a club and they need to renew their membership to the club. So when that becomes official in a few months, I'll let you know. The paperwork is to turn in the membership. You collect the money. You subtract out the $5 or the $2. You give us the net.
So how do we go about correlating who has done their ARRL membership with who's a club member? Right now, what I understand, it's kind of like an honor system where on our application, they specify that they are a member. But is there a way of correlating that?
Well, there's a special form you need to fill out. If they renew, they need to fill it out. The club needs to turn it in. You collect their membership fee and you send us the net. Right now, you'd send us $47, which I'm paying you. In the future, it'll be $44. But if it's done directly, back up. The website was written by 2 crippled gnomes, I think, in a basement. It doesn't work. In order to fix the website so you can do it online, it's almost impossible. We're going to have to rewrite this out. We're going to have to rewrite the website. So it'll be done through the club. You will fill out the paperwork, send it in. But $2 is not. That's the reason I pointed it out. The board has agreed to it. The committee's now going through the administrative nightmare of getting it done. So, but that's just a little thing, but it's something that goes straight back to the clubs. The handbook for the officers will get written. We are now trying to redesign areas to get support. It will result in a complete revamping of the support through that structure. If you're involved in area or NTS, you'll be seeing that change over the next year. When David negotiated with ARDC to get the grant money, there was a discussion between ARDC and David that none of this works for free. So it's not 500. 500 is a grant pot. They gave $100,000 to the foundation to pay for the expenses. So all the administrative costs are covered with that 100,000. So he's correct. The 500,000 is pure money to the clubs, but there's 100,000 to pay for the cost. Good news, we don't have to give it back. If it's a $2,500 grant, a $3,500 grant, it's not going to be tracked real close. But once it gets beyond a certain number, it's going to be tracked. And it's not because they don't trust the clubs. ARDC is a 501c3. foundation's a 501c3. So is the league. The magic and the problem with that is that when you move money around and make contributions, if you don't account for it correctly, or if the charitable purpose isn't fulfilled, the IRS can come back and knock on your door and make you pay taxes on it. When ARDC gives the money to the league, there's a very special contract that did this. I'm one of the people that worked on it. So when they give it to another 501c3, the IRS requires that they track it to a certain point. So if you get a grant, you'll have a reporting requirement too. Dave's question is, why do we have, I'm going to reword it, why on earth do we still have a headquarters in Yankee land? We've been there 80, 85 years, I think, at that site. Hiram Percy Maxim was not born there. He didn't die there. W1AW, the building, wasn't originally his. W1AW at 225 Main was built to replicate a building he had. There has been an internal discussion going on for at least 10 years about moving headquarters out of Connecticut. Connecticut is a high tax state. It is employment cost in Connecticut is 25% higher than if you go across the border to the next state. And the majority of our members are in Connecticut. And if you're a board member or you're a section manager, you have to go to headquarters. You would have more fun walking from here to El Paso with no water. It's at the end of all the airlines. Every January, half the flights we take going in are canceled, going in and out. It's colder. So there is a valid reason to move, but there's a magic number you always need to remember with regard to the league. It's 8. 15 directors. Takes 8 to do anything. So to move it, we're going to have to get, well, we've got about 3 or 4. We need to pick up the rest to move it. It has been discussed more than once, but it has never gotten out of committee. What Anthony asked is that really, what does it mean that headquarters said they want to appoint a club mentor or a grants coordinator? They don't have a clue. Sorry, to be honest with you. They don't know how, the headquarters doesn't know how to run a program. And they're fishing around trying to find people to help the clubs do it. It's not a bad idea. It's just that if you walk out into the street, you're not going to find someone qualified to be a grant coordinator, a necessary club mentor. It's a great idea, Anthony. I don't know if it's going to work. What can we tell you about what the league does or doesn't do? Again, there's so much that we've got going on. If I don't stop and ask questions, we won't ask or answer some of your questions. What do you want us to do besides quit talking and go home?
Just curious what the Arrl does as far as assisting people with disabilities. You know, Anthony, maybe, you know, we're legally blind. Is there any kind of program or anything within the Arrl?
There is a special group within the league that has been started in the past year and a half to develop more support for the vision handicap, any handicap that we've got. Part of that is redesigning the website. Part of it is making the materials that we have easily picked up and converted either to sound or what do we need. Yeah, we picked up Steve Goodgame. He's from Mississippi. He was a school teacher. He has now been put in charge of what they call the lifelong learning program. A subset of that is how do we help those with handicaps? So he's been there, what, 4 months?
Since September.
Yeah.
Well, he's really been there since September but effectively he's been working 4 months.
He was assigned the job since September, but he's only been up there about 4 months.
It is, what Anthony's talking about is something that started a couple of years ago, but it didn't work until we brought Steve on board, because Steve knows how to do it. But one of the problems that any new hand has, we were talking about this. And by the way, what you're doing here about following up with new licensees, trying to bring them back in, keep them involved, using the club room to teach them about amateur radio, is remarkable. It puts you in a group of maybe what, 10% of clubs in the country? The league did a study a number of years ago. A lot of people get their license. There's 777 or 778 million licensees. Where are they? Why aren't they here? What we found out is that the majority of them disappear. They'll get the tech license. And then they don't know what to do because there is no follow-up. They don't know where to go. They don't know, what radio do I buy? Where are the clubs? What can I do legally or not about antennas? If I got a car, what can I do? What different types of modes are there? How stupid am I going to look when I key the mic the first time? That's me, don't make fun. That's the reason most of them disappear. It's not they don't have an interest, they don't know where to start. And strangers walking into this club will be well received. Strangers walking to other clubs that are not as advanced as you are might not be as well received. So the key to keeping them is exactly what you're doing, and that is involving them. Clubs are the clubs that are doing just that. And one reason we created this lifelong learning program is not every club can do or has the talent to do what you're doing. So we decided to create programs where if you're a member, you can go online to the website and you can see some of these things, learn some of these things that you would learn if you came here. But if you don't have here, you don't have Cowtown, you can go and learn there. The number of programs are kind of limited right now because we're going through doing them. Steve's job is, I keep telling Steve he can't go home and work. He has to work all the time, but his wife complains. She's meaner than I am, so.
He's not talking about me. He's talking about Steve Goodgame.
We end up now with a new CEO by the name of David Minster, and we're beginning to shift ground. Now we're beginning to open up new programs. We're starting to get a lot. Part of that meant we had to replace employees who've been there for 400 years. He's like, good game. We're bringing in people now who have new ideas and who want us to move forward. So it's just a frustrating process in the field and at headquarters with people like Good Game and some of the others. You're going to see changes. Yes, sir.
What's the story on QST?
I'm going to send you a bill for the paper.
Yeah,
Which question on
$400,000.
QST?
Well, there was some controversy about the last issue of the paper.
The toilet paper issue?
I didn't.
I'm going to send you a bill for that one.
$400,000.
Steve, I didn't necessarily mind the toilet paper issue. It was just all the drama that went on.
Oh yeah, it
to
was
get that out.
it was crazy. Go ahead, John.
Dave, here's what happened. We're in the publishing business. We publish books, we publish the air. Not everything we do, but we are publishing business because we have to create information, to provide information to the members and to the public. The problem with being a publisher is you have to put it on paper. And until March of 2020, that was not a problem. After March of 2020, the world flipped upside down. People shut down every plant in the world. Pulp plants shut down. When they shut down, paper mills shut down. And there was a shortage. And then it started spinning back up. The January issue was late by, I think, 2 weeks because we couldn't find the paper. Now, keep in mind, we don't buy the paper. Our publisher, Donald, buys the paper. They couldn't find the paper to our specs. And we made a decision to wait till we get the right paper. We did. For this last issue, that didn't work out. There wasn't any paper of the grade that we have been using. Anyone want to guess how much more we paid for the paper we used in this current issue than normal?
400,000.
No, 45,000. Now,
Yeah.
we had to go, the publisher had to go to the open market to try and buy that paper. 45,000 was not in the budget. We'll come back to that in a minute. What's it going to cost us for the next issue? probably 45,000. Could maybe up to 60. The paper market is so bad right now that there's no permanent supply of the quality of paper that we were using. That means we may be spending anywhere from $800 to $1 million on publishing QST that was not in the budget. And if you ask me what we're going to do about that, I'll tell you the honest answer at the board level. We don't know. The budget for this year, the league spends about $15 million a year to provide all the member benefits we have, publish QST, do everything else we need to. Because COVID hit, a lot of our advertisers quit. If you go back and look at the January 2020 issue, compare it to the July issue and see who's not there. Major advertisers just stopped. With no apology, by the way. Some of them have come back. But the publishing business, the magazine publishing business throughout the United States has the same problem we've got. They have declining ads. Advertisers are looking for other places to put their ads. Answer is digital, right?
Yes.
No, it's not. We think, okay, he's not going to advertise with us on the paper. He's not going to take a half page again. We'll get him to do a half page digital ad. No.
Mm-hmm.
Digital ads are falling off too, and no one in the publishing business knows exactly why. Everyone's trying to figure it out. If you look at any magazine, trade magazine you subscribe to, compare it to one 3 years ago, it's thinner. You'll see QS2 is thinner too. That's one reason we shifted size on it to make it cheaper to print, because that's the previous side wasn't standard. So we're going to keep publishing QST, but the paper was not our choice. It was the only choice we could get for a reasonable price. Everything else was a lot worse.
I personally didn't have a problem with it. But I just thought that maybe it was time to consider, is it cheaper to just do digital editions?
That's a good question, because that's been discussed. Assuming that we were to publish it only digital, yes, it's cheaper. There's no paper. The cost of production is exactly the same, but we're not having to mail it. We're not having to print it. But if we do that, there's a digital offer right now. If you are a member, you can opt to get digital. Not that many have taken this up on. An interesting thing has occurred since that issue came out. I don't know about how many calls you received. I've received a lot of calls from members going, because when they find out it costs us $45,000 and we'll keep doing that for another year, they go, would it help if we just switch to digital?
Sure.
The answer is yes, but that's not mandatory. But there is a discussion about how do we do this. Maybe in a year this goes back to normal. Maybe it doesn't. So how do we adjust for this? Yes, sir.
So just, I mean, if I opted for digital, it's the same cost, right?
It's the same cost to you.
Right. So, but why, so the thought is, why not, like split the savings, right? And so if you offer it digital at a cheaper price and you're getting that much, they're getting a discount.
That has been and is being discussed. The question is how to quantify it. But you're correct. If I don't send you a magazine, that saved me money. How do we now reflect that in what you're paying for membership? Yes, sir.
Can I go ahead and do that now?
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
So I can just go on the Arrl.
Switch over.
Just go to your member profile and if you can't find it, if you'll drop me an email, I'll send you a direct link to the page you got to get to.
I think it's only available on Android and iOS. I don't think.
Correct.
You cannot get it on your PC.
No, you can get it on your PC now.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get it on,
Only if you're online.
but you can read it offline. You can download it as a PDF.
No, you can't.
Well,
Unless
that's
they
new.
unless they just
Okay.
recently
Go.
done that.
What he's talking about is another problem we have to fix. When we initially digitized QST, which is the first thing we digitized, there were no people at headquarters who understood how to do that. And there were not that many good platforms on which we could do it. Those platforms have improved, but we need to move to another platform for the digital version to make it possible to download it on anything.
I think it's been there. They just didn't know about it.
That's an issue that we've
There's,
got.
there's a, there is a PDF version that you can license.
Yeah, put a box on your cover page of the magazine.
Sir?
Put a box on the cover page of the magazine, you know, a little 1 inch by 1 inch or 2 inch by 2 inch of the cover of the magazine on subscribe digitally, go here.
Getting a change on the cover of QST is like getting permission to paint the outside of the Basilica at Rome. You have a better chance. You're right, but your idea is correct. How we get the word out and whether or not we want to strongly encourage it is a serious discussion because we have to deal with that reality. How much of our operating costs are paid by membership? Anyone want to guess? Come on, Dave, you guess.
I'm gonna guess zero.
I mean,
Sure.
maybe-
I'm gonna guess near zero.
No. If you take a $15 million budget, we'll just round it off to 15. 48% of operating costs are paid by membership. The rest of the income, the rest of the money comes from income from selling books, selling ads in QST or the other magazines, and donations.
And then the diamond program,
Pardon?
the diamond program portion of the world.
On any given year, he's talking about the Diamond Club program.
Yeah.
On any given year, about $1 million of the operational costs come from donations from all of us. They're random. Dave will give us $1. Anthony sends us a bill. But with everyone sending money in, we end up about $1 million. It's a critical portion of the budget. That's what pays for the league and what we do. Advertising in the magazines, book sales, membership, and donations. Any one of those falls off, we end up with shortfall. Because of COVID, we're going to look at $1.4 million to $1.8 million shortfall this year. That's before we get to the paper. We aren't going away. We've got a $38 million endowment, which is a result of donations from people like Brother Pugh, who left us money, others who left money in the wills, people who make donations. So we have backup, we have reserves. So we can have a bad year, but that's how the money works out. So if we have a paper problem, we have other problems, we have to figure out how to replace that. And that's something we're going to do. But one of the things we have to fix is a platform for making digital readily available and making it work. And that's part of the new plan. It hasn't been done yet.
Well, it ain't that hard.
Sir?
It ain't
It's
that
not
hard.
that hard. No.
Seriously, there is a tool out there
Well,
that you can use and license.
I
the
know
problem
that.
is it's
I know
hard
that.
to get 8 directors to agree.
No, not even the director. We agree. The board understands this all needs to be fixed. The problem is inside the building. We've got to have people who know how to do it and get them to do it. But you're correct. It's not that difficult. That's the argument the board made. So it'll get done.
Well, sooner the better. I mean, I would go electronic today if I could.
That's the reason the board is pushing for
You
people to
can.
get it done. We're short-staffed in some places.
Hey, Sam, if you're looking for how to do that, just click on your name once you're logged into the site and it'll bring up your profile.
Yes, sir.
And I'm
Okay.
signed up to go digital, and so I get digital, but I also get a paper copy.
Opt out. There's a new box on your profile down there where you did that. And there's a box that you have to click that says opt out, and then you won't get print anymore.
If you don't opt out, we will not automatically terminate the issue.
No.
You have to tell us you want to terminate, but we won't do it otherwise.
Now, that's why a lot of people don't click on opt out, Dave, because they think, well, I'm not going to get anything there.
I told you the league had not been focused on doing a lot of things that needed to be done. Besides helping the clubs, areas, NTS, everything. One of the things that the league did not pay attention to was 535 critters that come into Washington, D.C. on a regular basis. Congress determines whether we live or die. Because I think some of you may have heard me say that all the gold is not in the bank in California. It sits in this room. We have the largest allocation of frequencies in the world. And 1 kilohertz can be worth $1 billion. 3.3 to 3.5 was under attack. They just awarded 100 new licensees on 3.45, 3.35, the FCC did. That was a frequency that we used to have. We were secondary, we're not anymore. The league didn't pay attention to politics. Now we're switched over to pay attention to politics. But because they weren't paying attention to it before, the Ray-Baum Act was passed in 2018. The Ray-Baum Act is named after, it's a recognition for someone who did something great in the past. But part of that was to restore to the FCC the ability to assess fees. Before 1988, we all paid license fees. In 1988, Congress had gotten tired of the FCC getting sued. The FCC is like any government agency. You didn't give them enough money. They want more. So they kept raising the fees on everyone. And they were sued because the law says they can collect fees at the time. They could collect fees to cover their costs. They were increasing the cost, the charge greater than their cost. They lost 2 major lawsuits and went to the Supreme Court. Congress got tired of the complaints from the field, people using communication services. They passed a law in 1988 that took away from the FCC the ability to assess fees. Congress set the fees. Why did we end up with no fees? The House bill and the Senate bill did not match. When the bills don't match, Congress, the Senate and the House form a conference committee. And they're supposed to go in the room and after drinking whiskey and smoking cigars, supposed to come up with a combined bill. A House member was assigned to the conference committee. He had the good sense to hire someone to work for him who had an amateur radio license. And as he's going down the hall to the conference committee room, he stopped and said, "Steve, I don't know anything about this. What am I supposed to do?" His staffer said, "You make sure amateur radio gets no fees." Put it in the conference committee bill, came out since '88, except bandy fees. We didn't have license fees. But Congress in 2018 decided they'd gotten tired of setting the license fees. They sent it back to the FCC, gave them authority to reset fees based on cost. What came out of the FCC was a proposal of $50 for FRS, GMRS, and amateur radio licenses. We filed an objection instantly. We used every argument in the book. If you look at what we contribute to the nation in volunteer service, you want to guess what it is per year? $34 million based on the last calculation. Okay, multiply the fees they're charging us by the number of members, and those numbers don't balance. We made that argument. We used every argument we could, and it didn't matter. The section of the FCC that regulates amateur radio wasn't setting the fees. The accounting office was setting the fees. The money doesn't go to the FCC. This is the catch. Remember the old saying, follow the money? The money doesn't go to the FCC. The money goes back into the general treasury, just like Social Security. It's in a pool for the government to spend. So we're not funding the FCC. We're funding the government itself. And they weren't going to budge. We got them to 35 because there was a background threat from a lot of people. Remember the last lawsuit? We can file another one. We got it for 35. Now, to complete the answer to your question, we are now discussing, we being the legislative committee, I'm chairman of the legislative committee, we're now discussing finding a sponsor that will carry a bill that will eliminate the $35 fee on amateur radio licenses. Congress can make it, Congress can remove it. And we're going to try and find someone to put that bill in. FCC doesn't care because they don't get the money. So we're trying to find a sponsor to do that. That's also part of a new legislative program. Remember I told you the league didn't pay attention to politics? In 2018, about 2016, they passed the FAA Reauthorization Act. What was hidden in that is what we call the crop duster amendment. Crop dusters have a habit of flying kind of low. The problem is, if they run into something that's not supposed to be there, they can die. And a number of crop dusters across the country die because of meteorological towers. All these windmills, they don't put them up unless they know there's enough wind. How do they know? They put up a tower, usually 50, 75 feet tall, with all sorts of instrumentation to determine what the pattern of the wind is in that area, and then they'll take it down. We're supposed to notify the FAA the tower was there. Maybe they did, but not every crop duster read the notice to error, so they died. They started working around the country to get bills passed that said, if you put up a tower, I didn't say you, windmill manufacturer, you, meaning
Anybody.
a electrical provider, meaning a construction crew, meaning amateur radio, your tower would be lit, painted, and over a certain height, it would have the big orange balls.
40 feet.
It went to every tower owner in the country, which would break the back of most amateur radio operators right there. Well, it died in Texas because when the bill came up in the Texas legislature, we caught it. And we went to the sponsor. Of course, we cheated. I went to talk to the Department of Transportation, Department of DPS, and some other state agencies. If it had applied to them, which it did, it would cost them $2 billion in the first 2 years to comply. So when we walked in, we had the entire state standing behind us going, what do you think? So we killed the bill. But the league didn't catch it. The crop dusters put it into the FAA reauthorization bill, and it was the same bill. Everyone's going to have to paint and light towers. We managed to fix that because Senator Inhofe out of Oklahoma is a pilot and he likes amateur radio. We were able to go back to the FAA and go, you can't be this stupid. And they went, well, we really were, but they changed it. That's one of those things that can wipe us out. So we've started a legislative program to start watching all legislation that comes through. And one of the things we're going to do is try and flip that fee. How many of you know about the U.S. Forest Service fees?
Yeah, I heard about that.
U.S. Forest Service, another congressional bill said you've got to collect money to pay for all the costs for dealing with people who use Forest Service lands for communication towers. Well, that's AT&T, Verizon, pick anybody wrong.
Amateur radio.
There are about 100 amateur radio sites in the country. The fee they're proposing is $1,400 per site per year. That takes out most amateur radio operations. We're talking to the Senator Sabinell out of Michigan, who's chair of that committee. The Forest Service is trapped by the Congress. What we're doing is going back, not a congressional legislation. We're going back to Congress to get them to change that, to eliminate those fees in amateur radio. Because I mean, if you collect 1,400 times 100, it's only 140,000. That's one of the things we do. One of the other things we're doing is to fix private land use legislation. How many of you live in HOA?
I was gonna bring that up next.
So do we. Can we burn them down tomorrow? Those of you who don't, you're fortunate. If you live in a mandatory membership homeowners association, the people who run it didn't create these rules. They were created by the builders and developers. They prohibit amateur radio, or they prohibit outside antennas. Sometimes both. The legislation that's literally sitting on my desk, we finished drafting it 3 days ago. And we have a congressional sponsor. That legislation, if it passes, will eliminate every private land use restriction on amateur radio in the United States.
John, is this the state level or the federal level?
Federal.
Okay.
But a good point, we're probably going to introduce it in January in Texas. We're short sponsors. Our two previous Texas sponsors, one got defeated, the other one got caught with a DWI 2 weeks before the election, and he got defeated. So, but it's a federal bill. We've been working on it since 2014. How many of you heard about the ARPA bill? Amateur Radio Parity Act?
Oh, yes.
It was a disaster. When we got control in 2019, we pulled the bill from Congress because the people who wrote it, we fired them, by the way. We fired the people who worked for us. The bill would have wiped out amateur radio. This bill,
Steve was explaining to me, John,
Mhm.
that there was that bill, there was somebody that wasn't thinking they were gonna make it a federal offense or felony to have a.
no. the consequence of the previous bill was that if you violated, back up, the bill gave rights to homeowners associations they currently don't have. If you violated an HOA restriction that was created under the bill had it passed, you weren't violating an HOA restriction. You were violating an FCC regulation.
Which
If
is
you
a
did that, that became a subject for complaint when you tried to renew your license. It wasn't a felony, it was just an FCC regulation that could affect your license. This bill won't do that. So the fee, it's target. We're trying to fix it. We've got legislation pending that will get rid of the Forest Service. But it's another part of the problem where things are changing at the loop. Hopefully for that.
Unfortunately, a lot of things like that don't actually ever make it through. That's the sad part.
The magic thing about Congress is like raising a child. You know your child's brighter than every other child. You know your child's going to turn out just fine. And when they turn 18, that may go another way. Same thing with legislation. We know it's good. We know it should pass, but it's like making sausage in Congress. No guarantees. But if we don't try, nothing happens. And if we don't try, things like $35 fees show up. The program that Anthony's talking about, we've allocated $35,000 per year to pay for the fees of new licensees for people under 18. It's not completely gelled, but it is a real program.
So if we have someone coming in that's testing who's under the age of 18, can we have to?
You can apply if you will write me, write him. We'll get you the information
Okay.
on how to make that application.
Those are the ones that I want to see the most.
Right. The purpose of it was, again, to make it easier. It's not just for, when I went to school, you didn't have a cell phone. Most kids now do. But there are people under 18 who are financially challenged, who don't have the ability to pay for it. That's what we're trying to target, a subset.
And the key is they have to spend that money up front, and then you're proposing, they're applying for a grant to get reimbursed is how the wording is on that.
But if you can do it in the beginning, so they may have to pay, but you know you're going to get it back. We need voices in the community to spread the word about amateur radio, not just members, but spread the word about amateur radio. You're doing that and talking with your mayor, talking to other public officials. That we met in 2019 with a group of agency leaders, all the major federal agencies. Everyone in the room was a hand. And the purpose was to start something been done years before. We used to go every year and meet with them and see how they could help us, how we could help them. And it was kind of a beating out behind the bar, because these people said that, let's tell you what you're not doing, talking about the legal. They said, you're not telling the story of amateur radio. If you don't start telling the story of why you are, remember, everybody in the room's a hand, then people won't know. And when people don't know, amateur radio will disappear. And you're seeing part of that with that Forest Service. Congress didn't understand why. You see other things. There is a bill called House Resolution 5378 that proposes to give away another 33 to 35, actually 33 to 345. We're in front of that committee now. We can't stop them from giving it away or selling it to the 5G and 6G folks. What we're asking them to do is to leave us as secondary, because we're secondary now. Part of what he said is true. What we're trying to do at Congress are state houses. We need your help. He can show up, I can show up. Actually, I think we're sending Zogale and Mary because they'll pay attention to them. But they will listen to you, because you are the people who get them elected. So if you ever see a request from us, and you will, we get this other bill filed, to send an email to your congressman, make a phone call. How many are people in this room? How many of you think that number has any possible impact to Congress? It does. Every time you call them, any congressman, senator, no matter, then call them to log it. They will all ask you who you are, how to get in touch with you, and if you're a constituent. they logged that call because that's someone who had enough interest to call them and tell them, I want that legislation killer passed. You can make a difference in a heartbeat. And I'll give you an example of how important it is. In 2009, there were 27 or 29 what they called wireless communication device bills. They're cell phone bills. Had any one of them passed, everyone who has an antenna on their vehicle outside would be taking it off.
Oh, yeah.
It wiped out mobile amateur radio. It also wiped out police radios, commercial radios, because the people who wrote it had no clue what they were doing. The senator who was lead on it, when we talked to him about it, said, I don't care. I want everyone driving with two hands on the wheel. His nickname in the Senate after that was Two Hands Wentworth. But we were trying to get them to stop those bills and to protect amateur radio. The chairman of the committee who's going to hear these bills set the hearing on all these bills at one time with 3 days' notice for a weekend. Guaranteed that ain't nobody going to show up with bitch. He was wrong. We sent out a request to all the members in Texas and said, back then, fax doesn't work anymore, but send a fax, we put the language in, and gave the phone number of every committee person and said, you call them on Monday. You send them a fax on Monday. And the messages were, we don't want these bills passed without accommodating amateur radio. Okay. Gonna mean anything? The other person working with me at the time, and I walked into the chairman's office about 9:30 on Monday morning. It's a busy day, right? People running around, answering phones, all the phones in the office are ringing, fax machines running. We walk up to the receptionist and go, we'd like to talk to the chief of staff. And she said, yes, and who are you with? And we said, we're with amateur radio. He said, don't move. Turned around and waved at the chief of staff, and a tall, very lovely lady came up, and she's holding a stack of papers and stuff. And she said, these gentlemen are with amateur radio. She said, these are yours. She said, listen, the fax machine hasn't stopped since midnight. Those phones, those are your people. She said, I have a message for you. And I thought the message was going to be security's on the way. She said, the chairman gets the message. The chairman wants you to know no bill will pass out of this committee unless the language you want is in the bill. All right, we're good. Thank you. We left and we went to the other committee members' office. We got the same message. Some of the messages were not as polite. It was basically the same message. So we walked back in the hallway in the Capitol. We're standing there and we heard the pitter patter of feet, people running up to us. It was a committee clerk for a senator who's a hamburger. He came up and he said, you need to call this off. We went, what do you mean? And this, by this time it was about 11 o'clock. He said, don't you understand? I went, my mother said I never understood, but why? He said, the phone system for the Capitol is shut down. The fax system is shut down, and amateur radio has done it. We went, kind of nice. We went, they're screaming at us. I went, fine, okay, we'll send an email. Well, we sent the email out. Headquarters did not send the email saying stop until the next day. So if the point is, one, if you walk inside with amateur radio, one or two things will happen. They'll go, yes, sir, or they'll call into the corner and get away from it. But that changed the course of history in the state of Texas. Every bill died unless it had our language. If you go look at Transportation Code 545.425, that deals with school zones. You drive through the school zone, it's got the little sign that says $200 fine. That's that bill. But what it has in it is language that says amateur radio is exempt from this statute. So when it says you can't go through holding a cell phone or talking on anything, doesn't apply to amateur radio. The texting bill that passed, what, 3 sessions ago,
Mhm.
it's got the same language. Most of the cities that pass cell phone bills copy the language. So because people in this room took the time to send a fax and make a phone call, oh, amateur radio still exists in this state. And by the way, when we show up at the Texas House and Senate, they ask for relief on amateur radio. We have had them kids show up with us. TDM can't officially back any bill we put on the table, but they can show up and go, we like what they do. And it works. And you got a question?
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I thought so.
No, it's getting to 9 o'clock. Like I said, we can be here till Monday. So we can talk about any subject you want. There's a lot going on, and everything that we're focused on is going to help for the clubs and for field service. You'll see more benefits coming to members, like the $5 for the funds. But I want to point out 2 people in the room. Actually, I want to point out 4. But you elect me to the board. You elect Lee Cooper as vice director, and we both thank you. But you also elect something else. All this was intentional. It was done 60, 70 years ago. You also elect the people that represent you in the field out here. Section manager. The hardest job in the league is being a section. They get the same amount of pay that I get. 0. Sir?
They got double.
Well, he says he gets double money.
0.
Zero.
But,
It's over.
but what they do to help amateur radio and you is, what, if you spend 20, 30 hours a week on amateur radio?
More than that.
I don't know how much time you spend. I just asked him.
And she's not talking about working DXCC entities or
He is before I get up in the morning,
5:30 in the morning usually.
and I used to get up about 8, he has been answering emails already. And so he's got 3 hours there. That's him. And then he has another 4 hours usually during the day that he's checking, answering emails through the phone. So he probably truthfully spends about 7 hours a day.
There are 2 people in this room who are doing that job, who've done it. The other one's Chris. Chris did an excellent job when he was section manager. He's doing an excellent job. In fact, West Gulf has the best collection of section manager in the country. Thank you. I'll send you the bill for that compliment. So, but the real work isn't done by his ladies or by him. It's done by Zogale, and in this case, Mary. Because without, well, in his case, it'd be lost without Zogale.
Yeah.
But they also serve because they have to provide administrative stuff. So it is fun, but it's a lot of work. So you can complain to him all you want, but thank him at the same time. Quit risk of losing every one of them. Once you get above 2 meters, and that's universal band throughout the world. No one's going to touch it, right? The French several years ago proposed to allocate part of the 2-meter amateur radio band for aeronautical use in France. The good news is it's a universal frequency throughout the world. The whole world lit the French up on that one.
Yeah.
They died. But they made the attempt. Anything above 2 meters is at risk because it's potentially usable by cell phone companies. These auctions are billion-dollar auctions. The federal government's looking for money. That's it. And you could say they don't like us. It's not true. They don't think about it. It's too much money. So what we're trying to do is a policy to hold secondary status on these frequencies. What is the next one they're going to target? We don't know yet. We'll keep starting to watch it. Are the HF bands at risk? Yes. Anyone in the drive past south of Waco and see the Tesla girl sitting up?
Yeah.
a company applied for an experimental license that they said was going to be used to develop ground wave communications using the technology created by Tesla with the Tesla car. There's one sitting down there. There's also a little one off to the side that they claim to be transmitted. 160-meter bed is where they put it. It's basically dormant now, and it was never what they said it was. Who uses low frequency, long range communication? Bingo. Who were the people that formed the company? They were all retired flag rank. And some Army people, all military. But whatever they were trying to do didn't work out. Had it worked out, there'd been an effort to take part of 160. Again, national defense. Are there frequencies that we could ask for? Yes. The allocation of frequencies is made at the World Radio Conference, I think, what, every 4 years?
Yes, correct.
All the nations come together, smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and do other things, but they also look at reallocation of frequencies. That's one reason we got rid of all those radio stations up on 7100 in that range. Everyone agreed to get rid of it. But that's where frequencies get reallocated. Every frequency belongs to the government, any government. And when we send people, we've got people that work for the league.
That's how we ended up getting the WARC bands a long time ago.
We asked for those
The work bands.
1217.
Yeah.
That was at a World Radio Conference. We asked for those. We got it. It's the reason we were allowed to use 60 meters. There's an attempt to take that away from us again, by the way. But we go and we ask for it. We're not the only one. We're probably the leader in amateur radio in the world. We have other countries coming in working to try and get more frequencies. I can't tell you what's targeted for the next conference. We are trying to keep 60. We're allowed up to 100 watts right now.
Mhm.
They're trying to take it back down to 9 effective radiating power.
Oh my God.
Now, who wants us to do that? Anyone want to guess? Military. They won't tell you. We were meeting with one of the heads of NTIA in Washington. We said, look, guys, we're not hurting anybody. We can't use more than 100 watts. And the frequency works perfectly. The guy leaned across and said, yes, it does. We went, okay, what does that mean? He said, you're going to lose. Why are we going to lose? Finally, after enough, I can't remember whether it's coffee or whiskey, you can guess. He said, because your use interferes with certain activities that are important to the nation, and it's not just in the United States. I went, do you want to expand on that? He went, if I tell you, I will kill you.
And that was 60 meters, you said?
60.
Yeah. What's happening is because it works so well, it's being used by 3-letter agencies. And it's being used around the world. It's being used by the military. Most of it's encrypted, but it works so well, they want us out of Dodge. So we're fighting to keep it because we don't really interfere with them that much. But every time, every 4 years when World Radio Conference comes, we are there looking for more frequencies.
I'm really trying to push clubs to honor their own with one of the Arrl awards. And all it takes really is building a nomination committee and find somebody in your club or outside your club in your community that meets some of the requirements. Now, I have heard pushback on this, that all the Arrl national awards for amateur radio operators, and what am I talking about? I'm talking about the Hiram Percy Maximum Memorial Award, the Silver Antenna Award, which has nothing to do with antennas, by the way. It's a PR thing. It's for a person that has published a lot of press releases, bless you. And that list goes on. There's 10 solid awards there that there's people in North Texas that we should be honoring. You know, year after year, these awards go to East Coasties. Well, the handwriting should be on the wall. It's not going to happen again. So with a little bit of effort, we could start taking some of those awards. And to be honest with you, probably 30%, maybe 40% of those awards don't even get awarded each year because nobody gets nominated, y'all. The Hiram Percy Maximum Youth Award began in 1950, was it 68 or 58, John?
58.
58. So do the math. That's well over 50 years, well over. So it's probably closer to what? Somebody do the math for me.
64 years.
64 years. So guess how many times it's been awarded? 58. So that's a very prestigious award for youth in our community. And I proved that we could get a North Texan that award last year.
And Catherine goes to A&M.
Yep. And get and
We can take that award back anytime.
and she's the first female in Texas to get that award. She's the second Texan to ever get that award and the first North Texas amateur radio youth to receive that award.
The award comes with $1,500 stipend.
That's
She
a
also is really fundamental in pop stunts club.
Catherine is super dynamic and impossible to replace. And it is a very hard struggle for me to find another section youth coordinator. And this is one of the reasons why most section managers take the easy way out. Because I asked when I first took office, I asked other section managers and the section manager's email reflector, I said, how do you all determine who's good for a section youth coordinator? Oh, I just find some guy that's stable and is retired to do it. And I'm like, how the heck can they relate with peers that are young, the youth? And the bottom line is they can't. So my goal was to find somebody that was young that could bring peers into our hobby. And it's tough. But, and back to Bill's question earlier about how can you all help grow our community? Have an elevator speech, a 90-second spiel on what is ham radio. How many people do you cross paths with in your daily lives that thought ham radio? Was that Morse code thing sent on the Titanic? Does that even exist anymore? Oh yeah, it exists. We talk to satellites, we bounce signals off the moon, we talk to astronauts orbiting the Earth, and yes, we still use Morse code. We have contesting, we have DXing, and we have scholarships for those that are fixing to go off into college. And we have scholarship money that stays on the table. Nobody ever picks up because of the lack of applications for those scholarships. Did I take 3 minutes or maybe a little over a minute to do that? Money gets people's attention. Almost anybody on the street knows a youth or a family that has a youth that might be going off to college and they might not be able to afford it because they need a scholarship. Some of the scholarships, you only need a ham radio license to apply and you probably get the award. Now, the key is don't wait till the year you're applying for scholarships. Get your ham radio license the year prior or sooner. And if you do like Catherine does, and you're involved in school and you tie a science fair project into ham radio, she did a really great one. She's done several, she's done more than 3 science fair projects, but she did one on the effects of daylight and darkness on HF propagation that hit it out of the park. She's also active in her community. She does Meals on Wheels. She does the Plano Balloon Festival when it was running, of course. And now we're talking.
Also operating from the balloon? Is that the one that was operating from the balloon?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But, and she is very active. She's fox hunts. She's very active in fox hunts. So how do we replace Catherine? We can't. That's a one of a bazillion. But we can find some youth that is also talented. And I don't necessarily am looking for the elite. I'm looking for youth that might be struggling in school. I struggled in school until I got my ham radio license. Because why do I care where Yugoslavia is on the globe? Why do I care about how to use the square root of some number? All that stuff came real important when I was talking to people on the other side of the world. When I was talking to Senator Barry Goldwater, it was nice to know actually who the guy was and what he did for a living instead of being an ignorant, stupid, dumb, you know what. I could have a chat with him on relative matters.
You were one of the 2 people that did Goldwater.
I'll take that.
By
So
the way, if you can dig Goldwater up, please do it. He was the biggest friend of amateur radio there ever was.
yeah. And
But he's got a point. The league gives out awards. Not all of them have stipends like this one. The one for youth, the Iron Person Maximum Award is a big deal. But there are a lot of awards that don't be given out. You've got people in this club that are worthy of recognition. There are people in other clubs. So they aren't given out because no one does. There's no harm in asking, no harm in recommending. And because the number of applications are so thin, if I'm not making a joke out of this, but if you've got anyone who's reasonably qualified, they have a really good chance. The scholarship money the league gives out is oversubscribed. $900,000 goes every year. But there's scholarship money in this state. A lot of it coming through amateur radio clubs. It doesn't. The Austin Amateur Radio Club has, I'm not sure what the scholarship amount is, but they have been giving out $5,000 scholarships since one of their members died and left them a fair amount of money. But if there are scholarships anywhere that are available to amateur radio licensees, new students, graduate students, get them involved. Because the people who have money want to give it away. But the league particularly wants to recognize people in our licensing class. Then you have to be a general deputy, an expert. If you don't have a list of awards, send me an email, look at yours. And you can pass it out around the club and push this. The recognition counts.
we and our executive secretaries and a few others are trying to stand up a Dallas-Fort Worth convention, not a tailgate, not a little bitty ham fest, but that's probably 2 years away. So there's a lot of planning and there's going to be a lot of tapping on the shoulder for volunteers. Dave, are you listening? Okay. And brain picking and so forth. Okay. But Marty or Martin tried to do a DFW, whatever he called it. And he was going to try to call it HamCom. And we said, no. Wrong. So at any rate, and he tried to stand it up last year And it ended up being 4 tailgaters alongside their field day thing at one of the clubs in Louisville. But this time he does have a venue and he's got room for 40 tables. 40 tables is not a lot. Irving Hamfest does 70 tables, plus a whole separate room with lots of space for licensing and testing. So that kind of gives you an idea, I guess.
Let me expand on what he's talking about. When Hamcom collapsed, that is the 5th largest ham fest in the United States. There was an immediate discussion that I started at headquarters. We can't really let that vacuum exist if we can fill it. The league is prepared to back to a point the creation of another Hamcom. It won't be called Hamcom. Hamcom's trademarked, but it's the equivalent of it. In order for that to occur, we can back it and provide probably seed money to it. The organizational structure has to come from Dallas-Fort Worth. And it won't happen this month. It may not happen in the next month, but we have convened a meeting of the clubs before. We're probably going to do it again to get Dallas-Fort Worth clubs together and see if there's enough support to try and put that back together. There's a great deal of interest. The research that he's talking about is that Zogale has been looking for venue sites to see how much it would cost. Anyone want to guess what it costs to rent Plano?
40 grand?
Close.
How
About
much?
$50,000 last time, because we've looked at that. We looked at venues. 'Cause we're going outside, well, not last year, but in previous years, we've been bursting at the seams at our old facility.
Go ahead, Gail.
The venue for now at Plano, okay, is $6,500 per day to rent. Then in addition to the $6,500 per day, you have to guarantee them an $8,000 in sales out of the concession stand. If they don't sell $8,000 to the concession stand, you pay the difference, but you have to put the money up front. It's to put a new bid, to put it on, we're looking at $50,000 to $60,000,
That's just for
the basic.
the basic. So it's a big deal. It can be done because it was done in the past. But in order to find enough support for you, like Steve said, we'll look at 2 years out. But we will be contacting all the clubs because we need people to do the work.
We need brain power, but we will also need manpower or human power, to be fair with
Volunteer power,
volunteers for like doors, checking
all the-
IDs and stuff like that
You said you
and
would
selling
do that.
tickets. Yeah, right. In your dreams.
But the league is interested in it occurring, so we're part of the solution if we can make it out.
To be an Aries member, you do not have to be an ARRL member, but to be anything above an Aries member, an EC, a DEC, etc., you do have to be an ARRL member. Now I'm gonna shut up. Guess that means we're done. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very informative.
There's some leftover